So I want you to look at this camera. I want you to say,
I'm Christian Gallo, and this is my local story. I moved to Ventura in 1975. We came up from Huntington Beach. I was born in Newport Beach and lived in Huntington Beach till I was, I guess, 4 or 5. And we moved to Ventura in 75. And I started kindergarten at Loma Vista Elementary. And my dad was in the restaurant supply and design business. I mean, I don't know the entire story, but I know him and my mom thought Ventura looked cool, and we moved up here from Huntington Beach. So I'm the oldest of 3 brothers. My middle brother, Josh Gallo, and then my youngest brother, Jake Gallo. Jake was the only one born in Ventura. Josh and I were born in Huntington Beach, but again, moved here. You know, he was whatever, 2 or 3 when we moved here. I kind of always wished I had an older brother, but being the oldest of 3 brothers was a lot of good times in Ventura growing up. When we moved to Ventura, we lived in the neighborhood above Ventura College on Hope Street. It was really cool, like in retrospect. So this would have been, like I said, in 75 when we came here. So growing up in the 70s in that neighborhood was pretty great. There was a lot of neighborhood kids in the area. You know, I have so many fond memories of all of the kids in the neighborhood, you know, going to build BMX tracks on the vacant lots, to the Dudley house at the time. Wasn't restored as it is now, and it was this dilapidated haunted house. Essentially, we called it the haunted house on the corner of Loma Vista and Ashwood there. There was all these crazy rumors going on about the Dudley house, and I remember it had this one green swinging curtain that would blow in the wind, and we were scared to even ride by that place. And it was like, okay, I bet you can't go up on the porch of the Dudley house. Oh no, you know, I'm pretty certain that I remember hearing stories in that neighborhood of the older high school kids who not only would go to the Dudley house, but they would probably break into it or whatever, go up on the porch, and they would go to the Dudley house. And the rumor is that they would take psychedelic drugs, and they would play a Ouija board inside one of the creepy rooms of the Dudley house. Not just, you know, when you're like in 4th or 5th grade, that was just, those kids were crazy. That was the whole source of neighborhood adventure, and you know, all the kids in the neighborhood. I remember just on my street, we had a couple good characters: Jude Miller, Jimmy Fox, Chris Raffanelli, just on my street alone, and then let alone some of the best friends I made, and that are still some of my best friends to this day. I met in that neighborhood, you know, riding our bikes around. And now that I'm a parent, looking back, and it was just different back then, you know. Get on your BMX bike, ride down to Mayfair, and get like eggs, you know, a gallon of milk, a loaf of bread, and a stick of butter, whatever that's from. Go down, and then my mom would oftentimes, I swear I remember this, give me a note, and get a pack of cigarettes or whatever. You know, this would have been in the later 70s. Oh, it'll be fine, just give them this note. They'll sell you, get a pack of cigarettes or whatever. I was in grade school, you know, later elementary school. Ride back up. I started riding my bike to Loma Vista Elementary School, pretty sure in 3rd or 4th grade. And it was oftentimes just go down to school, ride down Loma Vista to the school, ride the bike home afterwards. We'd go play at other kids' houses in the neighborhood. Oh, Chip Stanton. He was another character also. How can I forget Chip? He lived right down the street from us as well on Hope Street. His parents were classic. They owned Anchor's Way Marine down in the boatyard, and they had sailboats. And so it was always cool because they would race sailboats around there. And I remember all kind of stories back in the day of them racing Chubasco, their sailboat. And they were characters because they owned the boatyard where they would fix the boats and everything. And somewhere around 4th or 5th grade, we got really into Dungeons and Dragons, because this would have been probably 79 or somewhere around there. So we would go play Dungeons and Dragons at Chip's house, and he had the cool older sisters who would, be there, and we all, the young kids in there, oh, look at his older sisters, Naomi and Sarah Stanton. And it was like, okay, just come home like whenever, and see you at dinner time, and we'd just be off doing stuff with our friends. And there was other kids who lived in the neighborhood. One of my best friends growing up, still one of my best buddies today, is Steve Rowley. He was the youngest of 8 siblings, and he's my age. His oldest sibling is old enough to be his mom, technically, I guess, right? Because they had 8 kids, and he was the youngest. So whenever he would come over to my house, now he comes into our house. Now all of a sudden he's at the top of the hierarchy with Josh and Jake. And so they have stories, and I can't remember this, but Jake, or my middle brother, Josh, will tell you stories of Steve coming over and just tormenting, and I was probably a part of that too, tormenting my little brothers in the good old fashioned brotherly way. Somehow we got pellet guns or BB guns at one point. Like, we would have these entire games going on where all we're doing is like throwing rocks and dirt. The neighbors must have just been, the Gallo boys and all their friends would come down, because our place was the hangout spot. I don't know if I should tell this, but I'm going to go ahead and tell it. Jake won't mind. My parents had got divorced when I was in junior high school, right? So this would have been in the early 80s. And so then my mom had to go back to work, and she was a teacher. My brother Josh and I thought it would be a good idea to lock Jake out of the house and taunt him from locking him out of the house. And we think this is a great idea. I'm the one in charge. And we lock him out of the house, taunting him. And Jake went nuts. He punched his hand through the little square on the window, like it had the French doors. And we're like on the inside, like, oh, like whatever. And he'd like, bam, he punched through there, reached inside, opened the door, and went crazy. And we took off running. He grabbed a pair of my mom's sewing scissors, chased me through the house. I ran up the stairs to get to my room, which was the only room upstairs. Some of those houses on Hope Street in that neighborhood have just one room upstairs. I'm running up the stairs. I think he threw an apple at me and it exploded on the wall. And then he's, mind you, running with scissors. And my mom used to cut out patterns and all this stuff she got from Beverly Fabrics and all this. And so she had these big, crazy sewing scissors. He grabs the sewing scissors, throws a green apple, hits the wall. I'm going to my room, and he's chasing me, running with full sewing scissors. I get to the top of the stairs. He throws the scissors at me. I dive behind the wall at the top of the stairs, and the scissors stick in my leg. It sounds like, oh, that's crazy, now, but it was probably pretty crazy, but it was fun. And then you can imagine through high school, all the stuff kept up. But everyone loved hanging out at our house because they loved my mom. Some of them to this day still call her FM for fake mom. My dad, he had always been in the restaurant business. When we were kids, he had a shop on Thompson where he was selling restaurant equipment and then designing restaurants. I can remember at Hope Street, before he split, he had these drafting tables where I remember it was pretty cool. He had all the instruments and stuff, and he would just be drawing the plans out and everything. And he was friends with the guy who started Wood Ranch. And I remember it was at that Camarillo location, and he hired me and a couple knucklehead friends, Tim Williams and Nancy Rowe, who they were dating at the time, and he hired us to go paint the inside of the first wood ranch out there in Camarillo, because Tim and I had worked for, this would have been when we were seniors in high school. Tim and I had worked for a painting contractor at the time, McKay's Painting, Brad McKay. And he had a seafood restaurant in Thousand Oaks. He wound up moving out there. So he lived in Thousand Oaks area after, and then he opened up with another partner, he opened up a pretty successful business in Simi Valley that was a barbecue place that was kind of based on Wood Ranch, but it was a little, so they had a huge oak pit barbecue outside, and it was very like popular. So he lived out in Thousand Oaks after him and my mom got divorced, and he opened up that place, Mavericks. There were some pretty interesting teachers I could remember from La Vista. For one, I had Miss Coffin. In first, second grade, she used to wear polyester suits, and I remember her playing the piano, and I thought that was pretty cool. And then I had, there was this one guy, Mr. Baird, who was so cool. He had a bug collection. And my friend Steve Rowley and I know Steve had Mr. Baird as well. I believe it was Mr. Baird, but I remember he was like the wacky kind of fifth grade, I think it was fifth grade, cool teacher, right? And there was only a couple male teachers at the school there. It was Mr. Baird, and then the other one was Mr. Jablonowski. This is such a trip. Thinking back on this now, I think it kind of leads into my my proclivity for collecting things, whether it be records or banjos, guitars, or just knowing a lot of information that nobody really cares about except me about certain things. And that goes back to me with sharks. I had and stuff when I was a kid growing up. But Mr. Baird had a bug collection, and I remember he would bring in his bug collection and share it with the class. And he had these big cases, and all in the cases were pins sticking up with beetles and like big old bugs on them, and they were all scientifically named by their scientific name, and they were all categorized. And he brought in his bug collection, and I was like, this is wild. But I also thought it was so cool. And he had boxes of them. I don't know what his background was, or maybe some of my friends can remember, but this is the one thing I remember about Mr. Baird at Loma Vista. It was his bug collection. So fast forward to me on Hope Street in Ventura in the 1970s, chasing down bugs around the neighborhood with a net, getting the bugs. He even told me, you put them in a jar with a cotton ball with, would it be ether or ammonia or something on the cotton ball? And you put the bug in there so you don't have to squish it. The bug would die. Then I had these dead bugs. And I distinctly remember in one of the bedrooms over at Hope Street, putting whatever crazy bug, like I had like bumblebees, I had whatever. And I wanted to make the boxes like he had. So I remember I had these shoe boxes with the cotton on the bottom like he had, and then the pins coming up with bugs. And I literally, for about a year, this was probably fifth grade, I had literally like shoe boxes of bugs because of Mr. Baird. To kind of go back a little bit, I can also remember I was really into comedy records when I was in elementary school. And at the time, it was Bill Cosby. I had a ton of Bill Cosby records in elementary school. And my friend and I, Lance Vitanza, would sit around and listen to the old Bill Cosby records, from his early ones, like Why Is There Air, and To Russell My Brother Whom I Slept With, and all this stuff, all the way up to his 70s stuff. Now in hindsight is creepy, like his Spanish Fly bits and all of that. My friend Lance and I would memorize Bill Cosby records. And then we would get asked by the parents and stuff to do the Bill Cosby, like the dentist bit, and we would do that. And so that's kind of where the record started. And then that morphed into music with the Grease soundtrack and Styx, the Paradise Theater, and the Cars, and all that. And then that kind of evolved into ska and reggae. Yeah, Bob Marley and all that stuff was cool. But we also got like Burning Spear and Black Uhuru and all these really hardcore reggae bands. I laugh in retrospect. I think my mom hearing me up in my room listening to Burning Spear singing songs about Marcus Garvey and the Back to Africa movement, and I'm in ninth grade. Ninth grade listening to this stuff. In high school, Stevie Ray Vaughan was big, but we also listened to The Doors, were a big deal. And it's funny, you know, now thinking about it, if this was like, let's say 86 or 87, now we think of the Doors or something like that. You're like, oh, that's like 55 years ago, right? But when I was in high school in the 80s, that was only that was only like not even 20 years removed. You know what I mean? Like that would be like kids today thinking that way about probably Nirvana. No, Nirvana's probably even older than that. But you know, it wasn't that like far away back then. And we got way into that same year, 5th or 6th grade at Loma Vista is where I met Guy Martin. I remember he came from another school. He came to Loma Vista in like 5th or 6th grade, and we became pretty good buddies in around that time. But one of the funniest stories I remember about Guy at that time was he was kind of a ladies' man.
Even in elementary school, I was making out with these little girls, and I was little too, so I mean.
We're talking 5th or 6th grade, right? And it's like.
I'm making out with these little girls in the bushes at Loma Vista. Actually, no, Washington School.
And I remember him telling me he had this one girlfriend who I won't name, and I could probably name her. Her name's Kelly, and I work with her now at Ventura High, and she would think this is funny. I'm going to ask her about this, but I remember they were kind of dating, you know, like in 6th grade, and I remember a guy was like, "So and so likes you. You're going to ask her out?" And Guy was kind of pressuring everybody. He's like the cool guy, you know, and I was like, "Well, where are we going?" You know, and it's like, you don't know, you know, that's where I learned, to go steady in this whole thing. So sure enough, I asked her out. I was like in 5th or 6th grade because I was pressured by Guy to do all that. My younger brothers went to open classroom. They like brown rice cereal. They had like no desks. They had sharing circles. The teacher lived in an open air like house in Ojai that was built around an oak tree. True was her name, and she used to call the kids in like with some like, you know, yelling in the show. It's like woo, like something. All the kids would come running in, and Josh and Jake went to that school all for elementary. They didn't go to Loma Vista or anything. They went to open classroom, which is now I guess you'd call it the charter school at De Anza. But it was called Open Classroom back then. For some reason, for 1 year, for 5th grade, I went to Open Classroom at Sheridan Way. And I remember I loved it because it was like, 5th grade? Okay, we have Magic Circle every morning, right? And everyone just shares what you do. And then there's centers set up around the classroom that you had to do. And like you worked at your own pace. You could sit in a beanbag, you can go out in the flowers and do your work and whatever. And it was work at your own pace, but you had these centers that you had to do. So me and a couple of friends there, Jared Asdell and this other guy, I think it was Jim Fickerson. There's a couple of us there, but we would focus to get those centers done to be done by like Tuesday on the week, because then we're done. And then it was like a very much like learn about what you're interested in, right? So Jared Asdale and myself and a couple other people were totally into building World War II dioramas with like the M1 Sherman tanks, and we'd bring these boards into open classroom and like, we're building a diorama today, and we had all the fake bushes, and we were recreating scenes of like Battle of the Bulge or like all this stuff in 5th grade. So we would build World War II dioramas. I definitely have some friends who as adults now, you know, we may not see each other as much as we did back in the day, but like I haven't, like a good buddy of mine, Kevin Wade, who now lives in Idaho, we just saw him this summer on a road trip, and I hadn't seen him in a couple years, and it was, there's never any uncomfortableness. You know what I mean? Like I have several friends that fall into that category, but they all go back to those days. let's see, middle school for me would have been 81, 82. This is when we started getting into kind of like bands. And the first bands that some of me and my friends were into was this whole ska movement, right? So we were really into the Specials and the Selector and the Bad Manners, the English Beat, the early ska movement. My friend Kevin Wade and I, and Steve Rowley, although Steve Rowley tried to do this, but his parents were a little bit more strict and he would have to kind of sneak out of the house on it. But Kevin and I, we went full mod like ska. I had a black trench coat that I'd wear with the Specials patched on the back. We would go shopping at the thrift stores downtown and I would get the chef pants. They're like the black and white, little tiny checkered chef pants. We had the wingtips, the full thing. I went to Joe's Barbershop on Ashwood. Old Joe, he's this old grizzled World War II vet with a toupee and smoke a huge cigarette while he's cutting your hair and the ashes would drip down on your shoulder. And he would give me a flat top haircut. the whole thing, the flat top. And we would go to school in middle school looking like this, like such idiots. Like look back, I mean, it was cool back then, and then Kevin, who lived right up around the corner from me in the neighborhood, he would do the same thing, kind of the same stuff, you know. But his dad was in the Navy, and he was a real kind of like higher up guy in the Navy down at the base down there. He would teach people how to use the Tomahawk cruise missiles. Everyone in the neighborhood was kind of afraid of him. We'd call him Commander Wade, because he'd come home from work in his white dresses with all his medals and everything. And he was the dad, like in the neighborhood, when you saw him come, you're like, oh shit, he's home. Like, okay, come on. You know, and you're like, okay, hey, hi, Mr. Wade. You know, he's like, hey, what are you guys doing? And you're like, oh, nothing. You know, there were certain people back in the day whose like parents, like you were afraid of. I don't know if that exists today, but for sure, Carl Wade was one of those guys. Love him too, but I actually liked him, but he's just that, you know, we were afraid of him. 7th or 8th grade, I used to compete as a bodyboarder. We would go to competitions and all this stuff, like boogie boarding, you know, but bodyboarding is a cool way of saying it. You know, we got way into that, and we would go down, and that was even really up until like 9th grade, maybe 10th grade. And we were, my friend Kevin and I and, you know, Steve and these guys, we were like the bodyboarders amongst all the surfers down there, but we would charge it. I can remember a couple of days out at schoolhouse. I'm not kidding. It was like 15 feet, like huge weight. Like surfers weren't even out there. And we would just go out and then we would do competitions. That eventually evolved into regular, you know, stand-up surfing, probably around 10th grade. Steve's older brother, Andy, him and I are pretty close back in the day, but he was like the older brother who I kind of, not my brother, but I kind of looked up to him and all his friends, you know, and we all did. And they all rode regular surfboards. So I remember he had this green board, a progressive green board. That's the board that I learned on. It was a 1970s single fin, full Crayola green with had like a red sun on it. It's probably 7 something single fin, and I learned on that. And then we all started surfing from that, like longboarding, and the shortest board I ever had was probably 7.6, who I got from Andy as well. I had this one board, a Yater. I remember it was a thruster that I had, and I got that from him. I remember buying that from him when I was in 11th grade. So we got really into surfing. And a lot of our time in high school was, what were the waves doing? We were so into it. Like, it's so funny looking back on it. It was all about surfing. And, you know, back in the day, you just couldn't look on an app and see what the waves were doing. You had to drive around and with your buddies, but that was kind of half the fun, wondering if the waves were going to be good. And we had vans. I had a 67 Volkswagen van. We used to pile boards on. My friend Tim had a 65 Econoline It's literally like the van in Scooby-Doo. Seriously, it was green and white, a 65 Econoline. He named it. We all had names for our vans. His van was Gordon. I think he still has it. And you know, thinking back on that, it literally was the van that had, it wasn't shag carpet, but it was like the 80s carpet in the back on the walls. The ceiling might have had like wood paneling. And then the middle was the engine was in the middle between the two front seats. And he had no seats in the back. It was just a box of death if you got in a crash back there, right? And the middle seat was the engine, and you could open it, and that had carpet on it too. It wasn't the middle seat. It was like this big box, and it was carpeted. That's how you got into the engine to the van. It was between the two front seats. And and his dad was somehow involved in maybe the radio industry or something, but he had the best stereo in there. Blaupunk or something like that. He had this Blaupunk stereo, like, ooh, you know, at the time. And then the speakers in his van in the back were these wedges, like stage monitors that he had in the back of Gordon. Man, there were so many good times in that, taking it to Mexico, sleeping in it. We would drive around that thing. His girlfriend, Nancy, would sit on the middle engine block, nothing in front just except glass, you know. And so we would drive around a lot looking for surf in either my van or Gordon or Steve Rowley had an avocado green, maybe a 72 Valiant. We all had these old cars. That's also where I started listening to a lot of good music at the time, because you listen to a lot of tunes while you're driving around. Basketball was always my sport. We used to play on the playgrounds at Loma Vista. I graduated from Ventura High School in 1988. I played basketball for 4 years at Ventura High. Guy actually mentioned it on his video, Joe Paul. He was a great basketball. I'm still friends with him today. There was Joe Paul, Chris Hankton, Robbie Turner, Kerry Brown, Nate Hankton, all these guys who were, there was some good basketball going on back then. Like Chris Hankton and Joe, they started playing varsity basketball for Mickey Perry. I think Joe was starting as a 10th grader, as a point guard. But I didn't. I started playing the Frost Soft team for Phil McCune, and just kind of went up. And I played varsity the end of my junior year and then all my senior year. But by the time I got there, those guys were already well established. Oh, Mike McCaslin, another great player. There was just a lot of basketball talent. Ventura High's always had a lot of basketball talent, but that was a really strong 4 years. I was an okay student, B's and C's, A's in art, and stuff like that. You know, I struggled in math and had some issues with that. But the big thing that we really got into, well, me and Steve Rowley and Tim, for sure, got into the Grateful Dead. That for me, with Jerry Garcia, Jerry is pretty much the reason, well, not pretty much, he's for sure the reason why I would eventually get into the banjo and a lot of this folk music and stuff. You know, the Dead used to come to Ventura every year, so they would be there for 3 days at the fairgrounds. When they were in town, that was wild. But the last year they played, before the city said no more, because the crowds were so big, was summer of '87. So that would have been the summer before my senior year. And it was 3 days of the Dead at the fairgrounds, and they allowed camping back then. So the parking lot at the fairgrounds was all buses and camping. You would see Deadheads coming into town like a week before. And I remember surfing at Pipe, and that first parking lot on the left was a dirt lot. And you had to pull up into that to surf. And then if you wanted to go north of that, you had to hike through sand dunes and dirt trails. And then there's one of the spots up there by where the arena is called Stables, because there was horse stables all along the beach. And so if you wanted to surf up at the top right there where it goes into where they're doing all that construction now, You had to walk from the lower parking lot, and so it wasn't crowded up there. But when the Dead were in town, it was people like just tripping out, like naked, running up and down the beach, and they would play during the day on Sunday. So I remember the last time they played there, we went surfing, and you could hear the band like right there while you're surfing, and it's just people just tripping out up and down the beach. We're out there surfing, and the Dead are playing right there. You know, it was pretty cool. But we got really into that stuff. And I can remember a lot of memories driving around in Gordon, or in my van. Like I said, I had a '67 Volkswagen. Just listening to a lot of tunes. And you know who else got me into a lot of music is Andy Rowley. The Rowley family was kind of like my second family. I found a lot of solace in that family because their parents were still together. Steve was my best friend, still is today, you know, and I just really loved his parents. We would hang out a lot there, and they had a really cool house with like kind of a basement that was built. I think their house was built in the early 40s or whatever. It's right over there above Anacapa Middle School. The older brothers like Andy and Carl and Matt and Danny all had, every Rowley brother had to go through, and they had this cool room downstairs. Each brother had contributed all these different pictures that they put up and around them. So the walls were totally, and the ceiling was covered with all these cool pictures going all the way back to when Carl Rowley Jr. was a senior in high school. So you could just lay in there. Oh man, I'd be fascinated, because now all of a sudden I'd look at those guys as an older brother who, you know, I didn't have. He had these records down there, and he was where I first got turned on to James Brown. He used to listen to this group called the Crusaders. He had all this music that I never would have discovered. I mean, he also had like English Beat and like the Specials and stuff, but I distinctly remember the James Brown records he had and the Crusaders, which were like this 70s kind of funky jazz group. He also turned me on to the Talking Heads, and Louis Jordan was another guy. But we used to hang out and party down in their room in the basement down there. And I remember when Andy wasn't there, Steve and I would go in and like look through all his records. And I may have borrowed a few at one time and returned them. But so he was a big source of music other than like what Steve and I and my friends were listening to. He turned us on to some cool stuff. I can remember driving around in Steve's Green Valiant with all these surfboards on the top, and we're driving up to Emma Wood and like Pitus and looking for surf, listening to blasting, Tim was in there, whoever we were with, just blasting James Brown, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. Oh, this is so cool, driving around looking for, listening to, James Brown talking about doing the hot potato and the camel walk and all these songs that were these suburban beach kids driving around listening to that. That's pretty fun. I distinctly remember a lot of that. I listen to a lot of that today. My first job was in 10th grade. My dad knew the owner of what is now, I don't know what it's called now, but it's the haunted house looking restaurant on the corner of Figueroa and Santa Clara. I worked there when it was called the Seafood and Beverage Company. And my dad's friend, Ed Warren and Hilda Warren, they ran it at the time. It was a pretty high-end seafood place. They're the ones who started Busy Bee Cafe. Back in the day, they owned it when it was called the Big Greenhouse. And their catchphrase was chicken fried steak and chocolate cake. They had this big white, like doctor's office scale in the restaurant. Their thing was you can go stand on the scale and your the price of your meal was based on how much you weighed. And for a chubby like grade school kid, I was mortified to go in there. And it was like, oh, it's just fun. Like, go get on the scale. And like Ed was like, oh boy, here we go. Like, like making jokes like that when you're a kid. So my friend who had the van, Tim Williams, and my other buddy, Kevin Wade, who used to dress with me in the ska outfits, we got a job working at the Chart House when it was up on where all those condos are now. It was Joe's Crab Shack, you know. We got a job as dishwashers at the Chart House, which was the worst job I've ever had. First to get there, last to leave, least tips, making at the time maybe $4 an hour minimum wage. We'd roll in there after surfing, literally pull up in Tim's green and white van, sometimes with like our wetsuits like still on, because we're like, gotta get to work. We pull up there, changing out of our wetsuits in the parking lot, salt water dripping out of our nose, go in and start washing dishes at like 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And then you're the last one to leave and the least amount of tips. And then we worked for a painting contractor. Tim and I worked for Brad McKay's parents, McKay's Painting. Brad, I think, still runs McKay's Painting today. So then we would get off school early and go do all the crap work for painting, filling in holes and sanding. I quit the Chart House because they wanted to promote me to like line cook helper or whatever. And I was not like mentally prepared for it that day when I pulled in there after surfing, and it was like a Friday night. They're like, "Oh, hey, you're working the line, and like you're gonna have to put all the sides on the plates and read the tickets." And I was like, "Wait, what? I just want to wash dishes with my friends in the back." And I think I literally went and told the boss. I said, "Yeah." I walked in back there. You know, they were wearing their Hawaiian shirts, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not doing that." And he's like, "Oh, really? Well, we loved your work ethic, washing dishes, so we wanted to promote you." And my buddy Kevin had already been promoted to salad bar, and he was totally ass kissing like his whole way through there. And then me and Tim were back washing dishes with this one guy named Russ back there. He'd blast like Van Halen the whole time. He's this crazy little dude who drove a little Volkswagen Bug. But they pulled me in the back office, and I said, "Yeah, and I'm not doing that." And they're like, "Well, but you're gonna be making $4.50 an hour." Oh, okay. I can't remember if I put in my 2 weeks there or if I worked that shift. Like I know I didn't work out on the line that night. I can't remember if I went back and washed dishes or if I was just like, "I'm out," and I left. I honestly can't remember that, but that was the only job like I may have ever quit like in that manner, where they were actually giving me a promotion and I was like, "Nah, I'm out." There was a whole crew of people from Ventura that moved down to San Diego. Seriously, there was probably maybe 10 of us down there. Todd Tyner, Tim, Lucinda, Caroline, Chip Valentine, Brent Evans, Kevin Wade. There's a whole crew of us that went down there. And we all were kind of split up in different areas of San Diego. And so my one friend, Scott McPherson, lived down there. He was the one guy going to San Diego State, and then he wound up moving in with some of us because his whole situation was weird in his dorms. But yeah, it was crazy. A bunch of us living down there. Brent was going to San Diego State, I guess. I distinctly remember going to Grossmont College, and this is when I first learned guitar. My buddy Tim Williams had played guitar, and I thought it was so cool that he could play Stairway to Heaven. Right? And so we're sitting around there. I remember just going, "Can you play Stairway to Heaven?" And he'd do the licks on his guitar, and he would play this one other song. I can't remember which one. But anyways, he would play Stairway to Heaven. And then, so I kind of adopted his guitar when we were roommates. And I started trying to learn guitar down there. Well, this is when I got into classical guitar, because I was taking guitar classes at Grossmont Junior College. There was this classical guitarist who was on the faculty at San Diego State in the music department, which they have a really well-known music department. But then he would teach some music theory classes and guitar classes at Grossmont on the side as well. And he was one of my teachers, Fred Benedetti. He was a professional classical guitarist, like the real deal. He would come in and he would play his, the foot up on the stool, the whole thing, play his classical guitar, and I just lost I just thought that was so cool. I kind of went down that route and started wanting to play classical guitar. So I took some of his classes. I took some of his music theory classes. And then another thing that was cool was he would perform. And I remember going to see him a couple times with some friends at San Diego State. And he performed at this little theater at Grossmont. I was fascinated by this guy, just classical guitar. And then he taught some music theory classes. And I thought that was cool, like learning how music is structured and stuff. And this guy was great. But then one day he comes in there and he was talking about the blues. And I didn't know like much about, I knew what the blues was. I didn't know a lot of the structure of it. And he kind of went over the whole structure of it, but then he had his classical guitar and he started playing like fingerstyle, like ragtime, like Blind Blake and Big Bill Brunsey and stuff. And I just remember going, oh, like, what is this? I just think I remember going, dang, I just wanted him to play more and more of that. I saw a lot of cool stuff with him now that I'm thinking about it. He's like one of these guys that could play anything. He was at San Diego State later, or maybe this was at Grossmont, where basically the faculty would get together and jam with the top music students. And they were playing 80s, because this would have been in 89. They were playing full on fusion, like what Miles Davis was doing at the time. And they were performing for like 20 people in the music department. And I would go up there eventually carrying a guitar around. And I would go at the time between I had classes, I'd go into the practice booths and practice playing. I wanted to play like Segovia, right? There was a point where I wanted to major in music and play classical guitar. But then once you start doing that, you realize that that's about a 8 to 10 hour practice commitment a day. And, with playing the classical guitar, I got to eventually found some kind of decent classical guitar. And I don't know, after a while down there, I wound up moving back to Ventura in 89 or 90 or somewhere around. I was down in San Diego for like a year and a half. I got rid of my 67 Volkswagen van. To this day, I still think about that, how I traded it to this homeless guy, Cricket, who was a Vietnam vet, and I traded to him for what I thought was a real 60s Strat, as he told me it was. Turned out to be a fake copy. I gave him my 67 van because I'd blown the engine up. And so I couldn't afford to get it fixed. So I gave him away a 67 van that he lived in. And he gave me this Strat, which when I got back to Ventura, I found that it was a fake Chinese copy. When I moved back to Ventura, which would have been in, when would that have been? 89 or 90. That's when I found, so I have type 1 diabetes. And that's when I found out I had that when I was 19. And I got kind of sick from that and had to go into the hospital like around Christmas time. And then I wound up moving back to Ventura, and just, taking classes at VC and whatever. I did the 10-year route for school. It was right around that time is when I had the biggest epiphany, 2 huge epiphanies for music that led me to where I am today, which would have been Kenny Sultan. I worked for Patagonia for a year-ish, somewhere around there. And I worked at their distribution center. And I met, and at that distribution center, I met a lot of friends who I'd eventually become good friends with and start being bands with later on. But that's another thing. But I think it was when I was working for Patagonia. It might have been before that. My girlfriend at the time, her mom was like a higher up person at Patagonia. I can't remember if it was then or whatever, but Patagonia had their company picnic at Soul Park in Ojai. It might have been at Libby Park. It was one of those parks up there. And at the company picnic that I went up to, there was Tom Ball and Kenny Sultan playing. And they're a blues duo that does traditional acoustic blues. So Kenny does fingerstyle acoustic blues. And then Tom Ball sings and plays harmonica. And they're kind of patterning themselves in the style of like Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee. And I saw them, and this was a moment. This was I was still playing classical guitar, and I'd seen Fred Benedetti play guitar down in San Diego, and then I saw Kenny and Tom Ball and Kenny Sultan play at the Patagonia picnic, and I was like, oh, it was just one of those moments. Just I saw Kenny's playing, and I'm like, okay, this is what I will do. He's so good. He plays like piano rags and blues, fingerstyle guitar, which is what I still play today. But I just had this one of those moments, just this epiphany. I go, I want to play that. So then I come to find out that he was teaching lessons up at the Folk Mote Music Shop in Santa Barbara. Sherry and Nadine, there was these really folky women who were super nice, ran the Folk Mote Music Shop on some little side street by the Arlington up there in Santa Barbara. Every Friday, they let me leave at lunch. And I was working in the distribution center. It's where the big Topa Topa headquarters is now, the big one over there. And I would leave every Friday at lunch, and I would get in my truck at the time. I'd bring my guitar to work, and I'd drive to Santa Barbara and have a private lesson with Kenny in that back room there. I'd go look through all the records and the instruments that they had, that Sherry and Nadine had in there. And Kenny would give lessons in there, and I was just blown away. I thought this was the coolest thing. And I remember he used to do the lessons. He had a boom box, and he had a cassette tape, and he would record the lessons on the cassette tape, the entire thing. And he would even play back stuff. And then he would kind of try and either tab out some stuff. I think he mostly wanted you to learn it by ear. And so he goes, okay, we're going to learn the Dallas Rag, or we're going to learn a Big Bill Brunsey song. And he would play it, and I would sit there like right at his feet go, oh my, this is so great. I just thought it was the best. And then he would play it into the tape, and then you'd take the tape home and learn off the cassette, and you'd have to have certain things done by the next week. And I thought that was really cool that Patagonia did that. Then to come to find out that Tom and Kenny, and they still play there today, when they're in town, because they tour, they're a national touring act, and they're kind of big in that world. When they're in town, they play every Sunday at Cold Springs Tavern, which is in the hills above Santa Barbara up the 154. They way at the top up there. And then you go down in this gorge, and Cold Springs Tavern is up there. It's so great. It's a log cabin bar down there. And then there's a restaurant, famous kind of restaurant, and these places you could stay at. But then from like starting at noon on Sundays, they'd have a tri-tip barbecue going there, fresh rolls, they had beer, and tons of people. There's a lot of bikers and stuff go up there. And Tom and Kenny would play out in front of Cold Springs Tavern from noon to like 4 or 5 every Sunday. And they would be sitting out there, microphone, the acoustic guitar, harmonica, and then they had Jody Hewlett. I remember he would play he was a legit drummer, but he would play a cardboard whiskey or oil carton with brushes. I would even go up there sometimes by myself if my friends couldn't go. But usually it was with friends. We'd drive, Paul pile in my van, drive up there on a Sunday and just watch Tom and Kenny play. And I would just sit there. This might be a little bit of hyperbole, but kind of at the feet of the masters. They're still up there, and I've kind of become semi-friends, got to know him over the years, and he's always kind of been my biggest inspiration on the guitar as far as lessons. And then the Jerry Garcia trip was more of the, actually that's how I got into the banjo. I met a couple of guys at Patagonia. There's a lot of cool people that work there. But in particular, I met Johnny Bruton, Dave Hollifield, and then Dave Gertzman. I didn't so much play music with Gertzman, or really Johnny at the time, but later I'd come to play in bands with Johnny and Dave. But Dave Hollifield, he was learning Scruggs style 3-finger banjo. I hadn't started playing the banjo at this time yet. I was just playing guitar, and we would talk bluegrass. These guys were all into punk, and they were kind of like punk rocker guys, and they were into other stuff too, but they were in bands in Ventura, or at least Johnny was, and Dave Gertzman and stuff. But Dave Hollifield he was learning banjo. He would bring his banjo to work, and I'd bring my guitar to work. And then at lunch, we would go into the restroom in the warehouse there because the acoustics were so good. And we'd be in there. I swear we knew 2 songs, maybe 3. Cripple Creek, Old Joe, these are like total standards, right? Cripple Creek, Old Joe Clark, and there was one other tune, like Word Man Blues or something. I can't remember. It was like going down the road feeling bad, essentially, was what it was. And he could play these on the banjo, and I was I'm like 19, maybe 20. I learned to accompany him on the guitar. He knew those 3 songs on banjo, and I knew I could accompany him. But man, when you're that age and you're just getting into that type of stuff, that's all you needed. I loved doing that. And then I'd go over to him and his wife, Davy, go over to their house and play the same songs. And then later, Johnny Bruton and Dave Hollifield called me up like a long time later, and that's how the What Me Worry Jug Band started. I met my wife, I was 24. I didn't have a girlfriend or anything, and I was kind of like a fifth wheel guy in like a group with Steve Rowley and his friend at the time, and Andy Rowley was living down at the beach. We were going down there to hang out a lot, and then his wife, Lisa, and all this. So I was invited to go one night with them to see the Jim Rose Circus Sideshow. That was, I think it toured with Lollapalooza or something. It was a crazy fire-eating whole kind of circus sideshow thing, and they were coming to the Ventura Theater, and I was like, nah, I don't want to go. Just like, ooh, stay at home, practice my banjo or whatever. I went down to, I think it was at Andy's place down at the beach, and then we had a friend we were also hanging out with that we knew from high school. His name was Clem Michelle, and he was living down there kind of around in the same area. And my wife had known him in middle school when they did junior lifeguards together. And so Clem was going to come to he also had tickets to the Circus Sideshow. And he somehow had gotten back in touch with Jen. They hadn't seen each other forever. She had graduated college from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. I hadn't even graduated college yet, and was just kind of doing whatever, trying, take little classes here and there, surfing a bunch, playing banjo and guitar, all that stuff. And so I got talked into going along, taking the 5th ticket that they had, and then we were going to meet up with Clem. Well, Clem had invited Jen, even though they hadn't seen each other since junior high school. He had somehow got her number or whatever. So she, I guess, apparently reluctantly came down to Clem's house. And so we all went out together, Lisa and Andy and Steve and I, and I think it was Steve's girlfriend at the time, Heather. Anyways, we all go to the Ventura Theater, and then so Clem and Jennifer, and that's how I met her that night. And then she wasn't too stoked on that situation with him, and her and I just hit it off, and we started talking, and got whatever, hung out that night. And I got her number back in the day when you had to, and I was so nervous about calling any girls or anything. I was super shy with girls. So I had her phone number. I think we exchanged phone numbers. I remember Steve drove us home in his bright orange, well, maybe that was sometime else. Anyways, we go home, we get numbers, and then, so now I have her number, and I'm living in the house next door to my mom and stepdad's place. They have this kind of little miniature ranch-like property, and they got this other house on the property. I was living there with my brother Josh, and so I had her number, she had my number, and I just think I remember going, because no cell phones or whatever back in the day, and I think the message machine wasn't working, and I remember calling her, and her sister answered the phone. So I told her who I was, and she laughs to this day because she goes, yeah, I think you gave Juliana like 3 different numbers, because I had the number where I was with Josh upstairs, and then I think Jake was living downstairs in the other unit, and then there was the main house phone where my mom and and Fritz lived, my stepdad. And so I gave her all 3 numbers and like, call this one, but if I'm not here, you can reach me at this one or this one, or, you know. I lived in Humboldt for a year and a half or something like that with Steve Rowley and some other people up there. And I bought a 1970 Volkswagen van up there. Anyways, it wound up back down in Ventura. And I had this plan that I was gonna be like a little junior Alan Lomax going around and recording folk music, right? And I wanted to go to the Library of Congress and the Smithsonian and see all that. I wanted to travel into the to the Appalachians and record people, because I was thinking about getting into like folklore. I was actually looking at a couple of colleges that offered that, like UCLA has a good ethnomusicology program, and so does University of Indiana. That didn't wind up working out, but so I was gonna go by myself, live in the van and just go, you know, and didn't really have a plan except to make it back to that region. And I was gonna take my banjo, take my guitar, stuff like that. And then I had this little Tascam recording rig that I was gonna record people with, because I already recorded some people at festivals around here, the Soca Traditional Music Festival and Topanga. And then I was really into going to the Goleta Old Time Fiddlers Convention at the Stowe House, was playing and recording there. So I wanted to go out into the field and do that. It's funny, we still joke about it to this day, because when I met her, I was like, oh, hey, I have this plan. And she says that I said, well, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm doing this and I'm going on it, whether you're coming or not, you know. She wound up going on the trip, and we lived out of my 1970 Volkswagen pop-top camper, traveling around the country for close to probably 3 months. The only reason we came home, well, A, we were running out of money. B, the van dropped all the oil out when we were traveling from Asheville, North Carolina, going down through like apparently what they call down the region, Florida-Bama region, you know, and then we were kind of outside of, we got the oil changed on the van in Asheville. And we're driving and the oil drops from the van, the whole engine throws a rod, the whole thing, pull over on the side of the road. The nearest town was Tallahassee, Florida. So we tow it to Tallahassee, rent a flea bag motel there. We had bikes with us that we had to go to a bike shop, get boxes to have them shipped home. Went to Walmart, got these huge bags, these gnarly duffel bags, which I still have, put all of our clothes in there. I had my guitars, my banjos, all that stuff. Sold the van to some scrapyard or whatever, and then bought Greyhound bus tickets to go from Tallahassee, Florida to Ventura. And I swear we made it in like 3 days. It was just Greyhound. I remember just going through like nonstop. Every stop is like McDonald's along the bus stop way. They let you out for a little bit. And I remember going through Mississippi like at 2 a.m. and this Greyhound bus, like looking out the window going, what in the hell is going on? You're like Mississippi, Louisiana, go through Texas. That seemed like a day and a half of the trip, and Needle, and this the whole trip. And we made it back to Ventura. And that was kind of like the litmus test, I think, you know, in hindsight. I don't think her parents were super stoked on the whole idea of us going. They kind of didn't really know me as well as they would, you know, obviously get to know me. And I don't know, like, it's just looking back, it's just, again, like, you know, my mom and like dad are, all right, see you later. Like, call us from a payphone whenever you can. I remember being at campgrounds, like putting in quarters, like, hello, like calling collect or whatever. And they didn't know where we were, you know, until we called and checked in. When we got engaged, I wasn't even planning to ask her to get married on the day we got engaged. We went up to the snow up in like Pine Mountain, and we're sitting in the snow, and I was like overcome with like, whatever, love, and just, I don't know, I just asked her to marry me sitting in the snow. And we went home, told our parents. They had no idea. It was like a whole thing. But anyway, so we wound up getting married at the Poinsettia Pavilion We got married at the church that's in the parking lot of Cabrillo Junior High School right there, the Methodist church there. Then the reception was at Poinsettia Pavilion, and Big Bad Voodoo Daddy played. And to this day, I still regret, it was, again, no cell phones. The band played. It was kind of crazy. It was during the day. And there's just so much stuff going on. There was a couple hundred people there. We had bought the little disposable cameras to put out on every table. And, thinking just letting people just take their own photos. And the whole wedding finishes, everything, whatever, we're wrapping up. And I go find the big bags of the disposable cameras. We forgot to put them out on all the tables. There would have been such fun photos of that, like my grandma on my dad's side was there, and she's passed away. Just all, it would have been fun to have a lot of friends with back in the day, and some have passed away since then, or just some you don't see. Just the whole. That's such a bummer. But the band was great, and but so now we just have some random photos and stuff from that. Jen and I got married in '95. It was down in San Diego. We came back here in the fall of '97. I start my student teaching at Ventura High, and then we're going to National University to get our credentials. So it's Todd Tyner, Steve Rowley. There's a bunch of us. We would carpool. Kevin Keach was down. He's a coach at Rio Mesa now. We would all carpool down to the Valley and go to night school at National, which was a teacher credential thing. And then I was student teaching half day during the day, and then I was teaching one world history class to get a little bit of pay. And then at the semester, my wife's best friend, Lynn Bova, her husband, Joe Bova, was teaching economics at Ventura High School. And at the semester, right when I was finishing my student teaching, he had got his first job working for the school district, which would eventually, he would be the principal at Foothill and then work for the district. And he just retired last year. Anyway, so he got his first job at the district, and he taught economics and AP economics. And so I was finishing my student teaching, doing U.S. history with Jim Sargent, and a government with good old Ralph Martinez, both legendary guys there. I really looked up to Jim. He was great. And so I finished my student teaching right when Joe was leaving to go to the district. So I didn't even have to interview for the job. The principal who hired me, Larry Emmerich, called me in and said, he kind of made it seem like I was in trouble. Hey, can you come talk to me? It's Larry Emmerich and Judy Warner. And I go down into their office, and they didn't even interview me, and they just said, hey, listen, Jim gave you a nice write-up. So did Ralph and the guy who was observing you for National. Do you want the job? You want to take Bova's job? And so I was, just total right place at the right time. But I was teaching 12th grade economics and AP economics. And he set me up. He really helped me. And I've been there since 1998. So I just started my 28th year there. And, in the meantime, I had my daughter, Ava. She was born in 2002. And then my daughter, Elizabeth, Libby, she was born in 2005. She's in college right now, and she's gone and traveled. And Ava's getting ready to go back to grad school. And they're great kids. I feel very fortunate. I also feel very fortunate for the job I've had, having started the music history class, teaching 12th grade AP economics, and very fortunate. I love it there. My mom's mom, June Hayes, she was very influential on me. She was a painter, and she used to do pottery, and she worked for Walt Disney back in the 30s on the original Snow White. I really looked up to her a lot growing up. And I remember she was all into to Joseph Campbell, the mythologist and all of that. And she had this whole thing about, just follow your bliss. What makes you happy, and what is your bliss? This was a Joseph Campbell thing. And I remember her telling me this, when I was young. I was like 21 or something, or 20, and I just always remembered that. Like, you follow your bliss, and then like everything else will fall in place. So whether your bliss is music, collecting music, the banjos, your family, your friends, things that give you bliss and joy, you follow those and pursue those. And if you could make some kind of a life out of it, you're gonna win. So the idea for the music history class came, well, I've always been really interested in that because I was a history major. I've always loved US history. That's kind of been a history nerd. In particular, the history of behind American music and all the folklore that goes with it. I really got into that when I got into the banjo and the old folk music and listening to Mike Seeger and Pete Seeger as well. The whole thing, I really got into the history behind these old songs and just the stories and the lore behind all the characters in music history, and in particular the 20th century. This is the 18th year of the class, I believe. And so way back then, they wanted teachers to kind of come up with some electives. And so one of my colleagues, legendary history teacher at Ventura, Linda Brugge, was going to do California history. And that was going to be a semester. And then I came up with the idea of an American music history class, and that was going to be the other semester. And I kind of was like looking at it at the time going, man, if I got to write the class, got to get it approved. It's a whole new thing. I don't even know. I had to come the outline. What am I going to, the whole thing. So over the 18 years of the class, there's some guests that have volunteered their time to come in because they think it's cool what's happening. They want to give back. And most all of them, or a good percentage of them, were also at Ventura High. So over the years, I had Chogeyotzen Maraza and his uncles, I think it were. They played way back. That might have been the first couple years of the class. He came in with his harana, I believe, and the harp. They did their whole thing. And then I would have Matt Sales and his group, the Kentucky String Band. They came in a bunch of times with David White and Mark Parsons. I had Whiskey Chimp come in, had the full band of Whiskey Chimp with Brent and Stan and Bill, doing their whole thing, and the kids loved that. Guy Martin, and he's been the most to come in. I want to say he's been there at least 10 years straight. He's got drummers in there with his bass player. He's come in solo. I hooked him up with a student of mine who had the music class and then was also in my AP Econ class, which was Jaden Secor. And he was really making a name for himself now as a guitarist and a country player. So Jaden now comes in, and Jaden's come in with Guy, and Jaden actually played first with Guy there because I told Guy, I said, hey man, this kid's a great guitar player. He's really talented. And, Jaden, he does a lot of recording now with Guy, but Jaden was a student of mine. I said, hey, Guy Martin's coming. Trust me, this guy's a great blues player. You're gonna dig it. So I told Guy, I said, this kid, and usually if you're like, oh, someone's gonna give a jam with you, it's like, okay, it could be a disaster, but they hit it off. And then I remember telling Jaden, I go, Jaden, you got to get a Telecaster. And he's like, really? And he had this hollow body Gibson. I'm like, listen, the hollow body Gibson's great, but if you're playing this kind of stuff like you're playing, you need a Tele. It's so versatile. He's playing a Tele. I don't know if it's 100% because of me, because a Telecaster is a Telecaster, but I just think I remember having this conversation with him going, get a Telecaster. Scotty Morris from Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, his son Jackson was a student in the class. He was really into it. He's a really talented drummer. Not only is he went on to play in Guy's Black Couch music series as a drummer, and that was really cool to see him go on. He's really talented. He's playing with some guys in LA. Scotty was telling me another great player that came through there is this Noah Boland, who his band Poncho and the Wizards just opened up for Jack White, I think, at the Hollywood Bowl. Noah's really cool, and it's fun to see the kids come through, and I'm start talking about all this stuff, and it's just cool to see that they start diving into, we're buying vintage guitars, or or getting into bands. And so the first band I started playing in right before the What Me Worry Jug Band was with a buddy of mine, David Royne. And David is a fiddler. He plays the accordion, he plays the guitar, he plays the mandolin. The only instrument that I've never seen him play is the banjo, and he's a walking Arhoolie box set. He knows Cajun music, he knows Irish tunes, he knows old-time fiddle music, he knows blues. He just literally knows all these styles that I love as well. It's hard to find people to play that. Mexican polkas and chadishes and all this stuff. And so we had a band going for a while called the Polecat Ramblers. Started around 2001 or 2002, somewhere around there. It was probably kind of around the same time that I got a call from Dave Hollifield to see if I wanted to come join the What Me Worry Jug Band. And then the What Me Worry Jug Band was Dave, who I used to play banjo with at Patagonia. He was playing 4-string banjo in the What Me Worry Jug Band. And then Johnny Bruton was playing ukulele and singing. He had this national steel-bodied ukulele. And then we had Mel Bergman from the Phantom Surfers was playing in there. Brent Harding was playing the washboard. He had this whole washboard rig he was playing, kind of like the drummer in the band. We had a wash tub bass, which was Mel playing that. We had Jeff Grimes was in the group. Matt Allred was our jug player. And we would do, I'm forgetting someone, Gordon Roberts played with us for a little bit. I think I replaced Stan Gonzalez, who would eventually start Whiskey Chimp after he left the band, because Dave called me up and wanted to know if I'd be interested, because they had lost they were a band before I was there, and coming to know Stan later, I think he said he left the band, started Whiskey Chimp, and then I think I came in for him. I remember Jen was pregnant with Ava, and she was born in 2002. So that was a long time ago now, but they're like, yeah, we do Memphis Jug Band tunes. They would do classic jug band tunes, and then they would do stuff like psychedelic garage band tunes, but in a jug band style, like Pictures of Matchstick Men. Most of these guys were all from a punk rock background, or a lot of them were. Our rehearsal spot was where Mother's Tacos is now, in the back area where there's a workout studio back there. It was like Steve's Plumbing Storage or something. We used to rehearse back there. So we would all meet there, have a few beers or whatever, and then go, hey, we're bored, we're gonna go downtown. I was like, oh, what are we doing downtown? And he's like, oh, just come, you'll see. So we meet at the parking structure downtown, and we literally would go into different establishments down there, unannounced. No one knew we were coming. We weren't set up on the anything. And I remember one of the first times was the old Sportsman restaurant on California Street, who I remember my parents going to when I was growing. It was a classic Ventura establishment. It was a crowded night, and we're down there, and Mel's taking out his wash tub bass out of the back. I've got my resonator guitar. We got banjos. We got Brent with his washboard contraption on and everything. And we got Matt Allred, who his nickname was JUG. We had Matt in the band with his jug. It's just everyone. And we'd just walk right into like a crowded night at the Sportsman, like people waiting for tables, not a seat empty in the place. And we'd walk right into the main dining room. And literally Mel would just be like setting down his like wash tub bass, and we're all like, and then they had this whole shtick where Johnny would pretend like he's tuning his kazoo to the ukulele, and like I'm tuning up my guitar. It was Matt's tuning his jug, and people like sitting in the restaurant, what's going on? And then we just bump, and we always play with this tune that Bruton wrote called Cut and Butter. It was a kazoo mania song, kind of in the style of like R. Crumb and his Cheap Suit Serenaders and all this, the Jim Kweskin Jug Band and all this. And so we would play a couple songs in the middle of the restaurant, and then as the management would start coming out, we'd like pack everything up and just like split, and then go to some other place. I remember the Sportsman was the first one we did, and I remember thinking like, wait, are we really doing this? It's like people eating dinner in there, literally in the middle, just setting up and played jug band music. It was pretty cool. Oh, we had so many fun gigs with those guys. It was fun. The band ended in about 2007, if I recall correctly. Brent was doing a lot of gigs with Social Distortion, his day job, so he wasn't kind of around. I think Johnny Bruton moved up to San Francisco, or was thinking about moving to San Francisco. Johnny runs a magazine he does letterpress printing, woodblock letterpress printing. And then he also puts together a poetry thing called X-Ray. His company is X-Ray Book Company, and he gets people to contribute, and he's really good at that. I don't know if this is the time he started working for Mark Mothersbaugh from Devo down in LA, and he had all these kind of Tom Waits he was working for. He got busy, he moved to San Francisco. It just kind of, there was different stuff going on in the band. So the band fizzled a little bit, and we just kind of stopped playing. And then my buddy Mel Bergman, who is famous in the instrumental surf guitar world of the early 90s, he plays in a band called the Phantom Surfers. And they were up from San Francisco. He was an electric guitar guy. He builds guitars and has all this crazy collection of stuff, you know. And he had mentioned to me about starting a potential Bakersfield style country band. And I wasn't super hip to people like Merle Haggard and Buck Owens at the time. And he was the guy who told me, kind of like, you know, telling Jade, Mel was like, we should start a Bakersfield country band in the remnants of what was left of the What Me Worry jug band. And I was like, huh, okay. And then he was like, you should get a Telecaster. So he turned me on to all the ins and outs of a Telecaster. And so I got a 52 reissue Telecaster. I got a Tweed Fender amplifier. And then honestly, there was a little bit of a time there where Mel and I had kind of a little bit of a falling out. What had happened was I still liked the idea. I got together a couple of my friends, Brian Hubert, who I've known since we were teenagers. He's one of my favorite bass players, great bass player. He used to play in this band called the Woodbones they had back in high school and college. He played in some other groups. He's a real talented bass player. He wasn't super hip to country music or playing it. I was like, no, this is like going to be the good stuff, right? And then we found my other buddy, Tom Mobley. So Tom Mobley, who was a friend of mine and then became a better friend when he moved in as a roommate with my buddy Kevin and Tim and all those guys up in San Luis Obispo. They're all going to Cal Poly. Got to know Tom a little bit better through that, other than surfing. I knew he was a great drummer because I had seen Tom play with Guy Martin's group, The Threads, back in high school. My friends and I were all at this Threads gig that they did at Ventura High. It was one of their early gigs. It was Guy on guitar, Mobley was playing drums. Jude Miller, who I had mentioned grew up down the street from me on Hope Street in Ventura. He was a neighbor. He was playing bass in that group. And then they had Jim Martin, who was Guy's brother, the original singer in that group. And then he didn't work out for whatever reason. I don't know all their band stuff. And then they got this other guy, Shane Wright. It was filmed by a teacher we had there. Chuck Enterline filmed it. And so I knew Tom from those days, and he lived right up kind of the street from where I was living at the time. So recruited him as a drummer. And so the original singer, or not the original, our only singer, Mike Askey, his dad was my basketball coach and a teacher at Ventura High who I'd known just forever, right? And we called him the ball boy because he's 10 years younger than us. When I was a senior on the basketball team, I was 18. Mike was our 8-year-old ball boy, bringing me bottles of water on the bench in Tuttle Gym. And so I'd become a surfing buddy with his dad, Steve Askey. We would surf all the time. And after this idea came about for a country band, I hadn't known Mike as a singer yet. Mike was getting married, and so he was having a bachelor party up at Kevin Costner's huge piece of property on the cliffs in Montecito, overlooking like Hammond's Ridge, the polo fields up there. It's a massive piece of property up there. And the connection is that a friend of mine who lived next to Kevin Wade, my neighborhood buddy growing up, his name is Doug Edgar, grew up and went to high school with Kevin Costner, and when Kevin went to Buena. And so Steve Askey knew Doug through some family connections. And so Steve Askey, old man Askey, had asked me if I wanted to come up with him to Mike's bachelor party at Kevin Costner's ranch. So I'm like, what? Okay. But I wasn't going with Mike. I didn't really hung out with Mike that much. And so I went up with Steve, and then I took along Steve Rowley, and we went up there, and there was his whole bachelor party with all his friends. I knew a few of them, but they're like, 10 years younger than all of us. Having his bachelor party, Kevin Costner's nowhere to be seen, but it's on his property through the connection with Doug Edgar. Well, so later on that night, there's a tri-tip barbecue, there's all this stuff going on, and there's a campfire happening, and I brought my guitar, and the guitar starts going around the campfire, and then here comes Kevin Costner, just walks up to the campfire, and I look up there, and I was like, oh, no way. Kevin Costner, it's Field of Dreams, or whatever. He walks in, and Kevin Costner just sits down and starts hanging out with everybody at the campfire. And I was kind of like, whoa, this is a trip. So I'm playing guitar, and then somehow the guitar gets around to, I don't think Kevin played that night. I can't remember actually, but Mike for sure did. So Mike starts singing. He's singing pretty sure he was singing a Merle Haggard tune or something. I remember keying on him going, there we go. Because I had the idea of Mobley play drums and Brian and whatever. And I saw Mike sing that night, and I was like, okay, mental note. I was surfing with Steve like the next week or something. I said, hey, do you think Mike would be interested in being a lead singer in a honky tonk band, like a Bakersfield style country band? And he's like, I remember Steve was driving. He's like, oh no, you should ask him. I get home from surfing, he drops me off and come over, and then Mike's knocking on my door, and I was like, hey, and he's like, shows up. He's all, yes, I want to sing in the band. He came over to my house, knocked on my door that night and said, yes, I'm in. And so I got a hold of Mobley and Brian and said, we're doing it. And we sat around thinking of band names. It was originally Big Tweed Speedo, which Mike had somehow envisioned on like kind of the cosmic, we were thinking like Flying Burrito Brothers, and all this stuff. And Mike's like, Big Tweed, or like Speedo, like a Big Tweed Speedo. And we're like, what? And then eventually Speedo was dropped. And the Big Tweed thing comes from the Fender Tweed amplifiers, that I had a match with the Telecaster. Throughout the band years, it was always frustrating. I think Big Tweed was like a big dummy or something. And I thought I was Big Tweed, like some big, or whatever. And I was like, no, it's the amps. And so Mike was teaching at Elmhurst Elementary School. He was teaching 5th grade there, and they were doing a fundraiser. It was called Hearst Aid. And he's like, hey, we got our first gig. This was literally like probably within a month. Maybe we had practiced once or twice over at his house. And he's like, we got a gig at the fundraiser at Elmhurst. And I was like, what? We don't even know any songs. We knew 4 songs. Swinging Doors by Merle Haggard, 6 Days on the Road, Dave Dudley. We did a John Prine tune, Spanish Pipe Dream. And we did a Jimmy Heap and his Melody Masters song called Ethel in My Gas Tank, parentheses, no gal in my arms. That was and I just remember we went and did that. It was like a packed thing at Elmhurst Elementary School. We wore suits. We had the whole thing. Mike had like a white linen suit on. We're wearing suit. We were so nervous. Played 4 songs. The place was rocking. Kids were going around. And I remember playing the first opening licks to Merle Haggard's Swinging Doors. And the whole band kicks in, and it's just me and Mobley and Mike and Brian. I remember just getting like this feeling of like, kind of like chills, but like kind of like in your chest, or like, oh man, like this is so cool, It's hard to describe. Yeah, so we did that gig, and then we eventually got Charlie Peterson into the group to play pedal steel with us. He was a friend of a friend. After a while, Mel and I made some amends, and he came to me and said that he wanted to build me a custom double neck guitar, because he had played a double neck guitar in the Phantom Surfers that he built himself. It was a double neck Jazzmaster. The necks are both the same on that. It's not like one, it's pretty funny. So he goes, I want to build you a custom double neck but you have to do it where you have your name on the necks, like in the fashion of like Joe Maphis, famous guitar player from the 50s. All these guys, Jimmy Rogers had his name on the neck of his guitar. That was just kind of a thing. And I was like, what? Oh, that seems weird to have my name on the neck. He's like, you have to do it. It's gonna be a custom one-off guitar. So he said, I'll build you the guitar, because he was getting into building electric guitars as a side business. He was getting ready to retire. He was a business partner with Dave Hollifield from Let Me Wear a Jugman. And he was getting ready to retire from that. He starts building guitars under the Von Bergman name. So we took an old Mosrite he had. It was like a 62 or a 63 Mosrite, kind of a semi-hollow body one. We traced that, made it a little bit wider for the double neck. I went and picked the wood, curly maple and walnut. I bought all of the parts, like the pickups. We got Hallmark replicas of these old pickups that Joe Maphis used to use, the whole deal. He casted his vibrato unit on it. Like he did, he pinstriped the back. I didn't know really what it was gonna look like. I kind of drew him some like mock-ups of the photos, gave it to him. It took him a couple of years to build it, but he totally did this as a gift to me, as like an heirloom guitar. So I would play that guitar quite a bit. It's not the type of guitar you could use every song on every gig, because it weighs like 13 pounds. He had a custom strap made for me by Noki Edwards of the Ventures' wife. She tooled it out. It says Von Bergman on the strap. He had a custom case built for it. I played it on a lot of gigs, but one of the fun times was opening up for Charlie Daniels at the Canyon Club. Sold out Canyon Club, opening for Charlie Daniels. And Mel came to that show. Pretty much the music scene in Ventura, to me, and I think most everybody would agree with me, now, I don't know if it even really exists. Compared to, back then, like you had Charlie's, which was where Aloha Steakhouse is now. And that was the hopping place. Like Ragin' Arb would play there, and it was always just a crazy scene when Arb played there. Guy would play there. Dave Gertzman, the guy who I was telling you about how I used to work with Patagonia, he had a band, I believe they're called the Mudheads. They would play there. There was a whole scene at Charlie's. I mean, it was, early versions of Big Bad Voodoo Daddy would play there. I remember we used to go down and Andy was playing in some group that was like a jazz funk group. They were called, I think they were called Strength. I don't even know if I was 21 yet when we first going in there, because it was a bar. And it was a scene, and I remember a couple of times going down and just standing outside and looking into the window. It was all fogged up in there. People were dancing, and like trying to look into the window when Strength was playing, or when Ragin' Arb played there. It was always, frankly, it was always like a little chaotic. Ragin' Arb and their whole scene when we were in high school, they're older than I am. Like we thought back in the day, that was like the tough crowd. Those guys weren't, there was the whole Pierpont mystique and the Silver Strand thing, but it was always crazy. Like fights, there was just, you'd get the parking lot was just a whole scene, that parking structure right there. And then outside, the cops always showed up. There would be fight. It was just wild down there. That was Charlie's. There was Nickelby's above where the Goodwill store is now on downtown. Nickelby's upstairs. That was a whole scene. That was a cool scene. We saw Big Bad Voodoo Daddy there. Guy would play there a bunch with his band. He had at the time Rude Mood. The Bandar, that was the older crowd, right? That was my parents' age, but the Bandar was one of the famous honky tonks on the California circuit. And the Bandar was a real mid-century modern architectural designed honky tonk. It was owned by Johnny and Joni Mosby, who were pretty big names in Nashville, and then come to Ventura because of the California country scene. Apparently Johnny Cash was in there all the time when he lived in Casita Springs. Willie Nelson, when he was in town, would come drink beers. Everybody knew Johnny and Joni, and they Buck Owens in there. Everybody would. That was like a circuit stop right there in Midtown Ventura. On like Wednesday nights or something, they would have wet t-shirt night at the Bandar, and they had the the sign out on the old sign that would say, wet t-shirt night every Wednesday night. Like, it might have even been something like women get in free or something like that. And I remember distinctly driving by with my dad in the white station wagon with the wood paneling, the Country Squire, and driving by there and looking up going, what's that? And my dad just turned his driving, he's like, don't worry about it. In the early 80s, the famous story that everyone talks about in town who has parents of my parents' age, was that Willie was set to play at the fairgrounds, and he was hanging out with Johnny Mosby at the Bandar. And apparently he had a few too many beers with Johnny at the Bandar, and he missed the show. Everyone's down at the fairgrounds waiting for Willie to show up, and he misses the show, hanging out drinking with Johnny Mosby at the Bandar. Apparently, I think the next year or something, or maybe whenever he comes back, like within the year, he comes back and he does a free show at the fairgrounds. This, I would guess this would have been 82, 83. Like, I remember people of my parents' age and parents and stuff talking about this, that he came back and did a free show at the fairgrounds and said, oh, I owe you one, and he wound up playing. We would play at the original Zoe's. We would play the old Chaparral Club, which is the White House Beach Club. We would do gigs up in Santa Ynez at the Maverick Saloon. We would go up there. We would play at MadeWest Brewery. Gave us a spot to play at a lot because Mike is friends with the owner. We turned that into our rehearsal at one point. We'd play there once or twice a month for an onstage rehearsal. We'd do acoustic versions of the band there. Play the Canyon Club. Some of the funnest gigs were, we did 2 trips to Montana. So in 2008, I think it was, we took the band to Ennis, Montana, where Steve Askey has a ranch place out there. I want to say we had 60 or 80 people, the families, the whole thing. We had a whole big old crew that went to Ennis the first time, and we did 3 or 4 gigs around in Ennis, made a whole trip out of it, brought the families. We did a 10-year celebration at the Hong Kong Inn, which is now Vaquero y Mar, with a friend of ours band, the Detroit Sportsman Congress. That was Matt Sales and Bill Flores in that group. And that was really fun. That was like the night before the Thomas Fire. We finished that night, and then the next Sunday was the Thomas Fire. I always remember it because of that. And then, things went on for about another year. We did some gigs here and there up to the Maverick, and we decided to do one last trip to Ennis. So in the summer of 2018, we again returned to Ennis and played in some places around Ennis. We played at the Gravel Bar in Ennis. We played in McAllister. I don't know, a whole group of people went out again for that gig, and we did several gigs out there in Ennis. And that was the end of the band in 2018. Mike had decided that he wasn't feeling it anymore and just kind of wanted to, we'd been a band for 12 years, almost 13 or 18, almost 12 or 13 years or something. That's a lot longer than a lot of bands last. And there's been few bands that have started and stopped between there. I had a band with Stan Gonzalez and Chris Cairns and Lee Rolag and Tom Mobley and Brian. We had a kind of a country band going called the Nitpickers. We did some gigs around. That was pretty fun. And then we had Chaparral with Erica Harding, Tom and Brian. They were kind of like my wingman and all these. And then we had Gavin Wright, who is Shane Wright's son, and Shane sang in that iteration of Guy's band, The Threads. That was their singer. So Gavin sang with Erica, and we had a band, Chaparral, in that. And there's been some starts and stops, and it's just, I just found that it's just, you realize what Big Tweed was and how special it was after you have other bands, and it's not easy to keep bands together, not for really personality conflicts, but it's just difficult, And so we kind of did all that thing. I started focusing on more banjo playing and back to my acoustic guitar roots. Around in 2020, after the band had dissolved in 2018 and all that, I decided to start a podcast, the Old Dingy Jukebox podcast. It was basically kind of taking the stuff I talk about a lot of times, or the idea was that I'd do in my music class, but put it into a podcast. I heard some other shows that were doing kind of what I wound up doing, but not really. And I thought this would be cool. I wanted to basically make it because I collect early jazz, early country, early blues, and things like that on 78 RPM records. I got a big collection of 78s. That's kind of been one of the things I've really gotten into. And I wanted to make a show playing songs from all different kinds of styles, like I talk about kind of in my class. Like one song will be a pre-war country song by Charlie Poole and the North Carolinians and the North Carolina Ramblers. And then the next song might jump to George Jones 78 from Star Day in the 50s. And the next song might jump to an early jazz record, or, and then try and maybe think of themes for the show. And so the tracks are actually from my record collection, and I try and come up with different themes. And so that's been fun. It's got a pretty decent following, worldwide. And so that's the Old Dingy Jukebox podcast is one of the things I kind of got into to kind of scratch that itch after Big Tweed had dissolved in 2018.
Long ago and far away.
We never really talked about getting back together until recently when Mike called. He was wondering if we would be willing to get back together to do a one-off gig. Get all our friends back together and make it a community event. And we're going to do it at MadeWest. Seth, the owner of MadeWest, was going to put the stage out in the parking lot for us. We're really going to hype it up, and we had a good following. We made a couple records of original material. One of the things I like most about not only Big Tweed, but just bands in general, is bringing together the community aspect of it. Like you see certain friends that you maybe wouldn't see, and people come out and it's like a whole thing. They get to see each other. And so we kind of wanted to put something together. Mike's idea was to do a one-off gig at MadeWest. Charlie chose not to be a part of it, our pedal steel player. And so we got Mike's buddy, Jesse Gloyd, to play piano with us, which was great. I've never had a piano player in a band before. And then his son, Jack Gloyd, who's going to be a senior in high school, he played the second set with us, which turned out to be mostly Grateful Dead tunes. Big Tweed was a big part of our lives for 10 to 12 years. There's so many memories associated with it, and not only from gigs we've played or the records we made, but also just friends. Tom Mobley and Brian Hubert were two of my best friends from back in the day. And then Mike, great friend, got to know him through it. And then other characters we had play in the band, the gigs we've done. David Royne, my friend from the Polecat Ramblers, played in the group for a little bit with fiddle and his accordion. And I'm just really looking forward to it because of the sort of brotherhood among the people in the band. They're truly my best friends. And not only them, but also the people that come out to see the band are also our best friends collectively, and new friends and old time friends from back in the day. All right, I feel like I talk too much. It's like you could. Oh, bro, you're preaching to the choir on that one.
Let the world call me a fool if things are right with me and you. That's all that matters, and I'll do anything you ask me to. Yeah, let the world call me a fool if things are right with me and you. That's all that matters, and I'll do anything you ask me to. That's all that matters, and I'll do anything you ask me to.
I'm not doing it.